guys, I'm Laura Vitale. On this episode of Laura in the Kitchen, I want to show you something so delicious. We're going to make orecchiette with meatballs and escarole, okay? Escarole and pasta, it's delicious. Escarole and pasta is delicious. We're going to make little mini meatballs because if you're familiar with like escarole soup, then you know you're going to have a little bit of meatballs in there. And so I figured, why not add them to this because it's absolutely delicious. And I'm going to show you how to make it. It doesn't take very long. What I'm doing right now is actually taking some pine nuts out of the pan that I toasted until they were golden brown because I'm going to add some pine nuts both to the meatballs and then to the top of the dish, which I know sounds crazy, but you're going to have to trust me on this one, okay? You're going to have to go with me on this. We're also going to add some golden raisins in the meatballs, which you think maybe I'm crazy, but I promise you I'm not. Adding raisins to meatballs is actually a very common Southern Italian thing, or like in Sicily they do that as well. It's delicious and you get a little burst of sweetness. So good. You're going to have to just trust me. In here, I've got a mixture of ground beef, sausage. This is sweet sausage. I've removed the casing. I've got some panko breadcrumbs. I've got an egg. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to finely chop some parsley. I'm going to finely chop up 1 clove of garlic. I've got a pot back there coming to a boil with some water that I'm going to salt heavily. But in the meantime, right now, all I'm going to do is finely chop these 2 things. And I'm going to add them to the bowl with my meat mixture. I just ran my knife through some of the pine nuts as well. And now I'm going to do the same thing to the golden raisins. But let me explain to you what I did with the raisins. I placed them in a bowl and then I added some really hot water. I just took some water and I popped it in the microwave for about 2 minutes because I wanted it to be really hot. What that does is it rehydrates the raisins and it makes them a little bit softer. And I wouldn't do this if these meatballs were going to be cooking in a lot of broth or sauce. But because they're not, I just want to make sure that the raisins are really lovely, plump, and soft. So I went ahead and did that. And now I'm just giving them a rough chop, just so that they disperse throughout the meatballs better, because I am going to be making some small meatballs. They're not going to be very big, so I want to make sure everything sort of disperses throughout really nicely. So to this, now I'm going to add a little bit of salt, freshly ground black pepper. You already know this is going to taste good, right? And some Parmigiano Reggiano that I recently grated, like that. Clean hands. Mix around really thoroughly. You're going to get a lot of flavor from the sausage and the garlic and the cheese, and then you're going to get some crunch from the pine nuts and some lovely sweetness from the raisins. They're really fabulous. And you don't have to just make these for this particular recipes. These meatballs are good for whatever you want to make them for. Particularly good in some nice escarole soup though as well. And if you do that, you don't have to worry about rehydrating the raisins, like I said, because they'll just be cooking in the soup for a while. But not for this purpose. This purpose, I needed them a little bit more plump. Okay, so mixture's done. I don't like to overmix because then you end up with really dense meatballs. I'm just gonna make them small. I don't know, about yay big. Like that. I'm just gonna get them onto my plate that I have ready. Meatballs are ready. I ended up just rolling half of them, and I'm going to put the rest of the meat mixture in the freezer for the next time because it's just, I'm going to make half a batch for tonight, but it's great to freeze. So if you actually want to form all of your meatballs and then freeze them, you're one step closer to even a quicker dinner if you just remember to thaw them in the morning in the fridge. So I have the rest back there. Perfect. I've got a shallow Dutch oven with a few tablespoons of olive oil. I am not going to use super strong extra virgin because I don't want to lose the flavor of the meatballs, and I tend to think that it can taste a little bit strong. It's getting the temperature. I can see the bubbles around the base of the meatballs. I'm just going to put them in here. I'm not looking to get these like a super like ferocious sear on them because they are going to need to cook all the way through in the skillet. So I'm just going to cook them on medium heat until they are what my nonna calls rosolate, which means they're beautifully golden all over. And I'll come in here periodically and just give them all a nice stir. I'm going to check on my pasta water. When it's close to adding the pasta, I will chat with you so we can move on to the next step. Meatballs look gorgeous. You got a lot of flavor in that olive oil, and do not get rid of it because we're gonna cook our escarole in there. The pasta of choice I'm using is orecchiette, which that just means little ears. I just like the shape. You can really use any shape. You want to use a nice rigatoni, use rigatoni. Whatever your heart desires. What I'm doing right now is crushing a couple of cloves of garlic. I'm going to add them right in because I want to flavor that oil just a tiny bit more because that's the goodness of which your kale is going to cook in, right? Along with a good pinch of hot pepper flakes. It balances the sweetness in the meatball. Okay, now, while those go for just a few minutes. By the way, if you don't eat a couple of meatballs when they look like this, you are not living. Okay, let's talk escarole. This is what escarole looks like. It kind of looks like romaine, but it's not. It's a little hardier. It's not real bitter, but it's a little bit on the edge. So I've washed it. Doesn't necessarily, you don't necessarily have to dry it. Doesn't really matter, but you want to wash it really, really well. Escarole tends to be really dirty. I washed it and then just roughly chopped it. And all I'm going to do, this smells so good already. You can smell everything in the meatballs. You could smell the fennel in the sausage. You could smell the parsley. You could smell the parm. You could smell everything. And I love that. I'm going to add my escarole right on top. And I know what you're thinking. That's a whole lot of escarole. But escarole is just like spinach. It's going to cook down to absolutely nothing. So you're going to want to use one giant bunch or two for about 8 ounces of pasta. I'm going to go ahead and take my lid, I'm going to put it on, and now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn this down to low, and I'm going to go ahead and add the pasta to the boiling water that I'm going to salt really, really well, and I'm going to cook the pasta about 2 minutes shy of what the package tells you. So if the package tells you need to cook it for 11 minutes for al dente, I'm going to cook it for 9. I'm going to cook mine around 8 minutes or so, and then right before I drain it, I'm going to reserve a little bit of the starchy cooking water because that is the magic that's going to kind of make this a sauce, that along with the parm and the flavored oil. It's so good. It's so, so, so good. It's almost ridiculous. You can't mess this up. You don't want to use kale. I'm sorry, you don't want to use escarole. You can use kale. You could use broccoli rabe. Although for me, that's a different dish. To me, that's like sausage and broccoli rabe only. It's a thing, okay? Let me live. But it's amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and add the pasta in, keep an eye on everything, and then we'll be that much closer to eating, which we all know I need because I'm starting to not make sense because I'm hungry. See how much that wilted down to practically half. Just going to give this a quick taste. Any salt. The escarole itself needs to be salted. Okay, that hot pepper flake went like right here. Every time Mia takes a drink and like goes down the wrong pipe, she'll go, "Oh, mommy, I went down the wrong pipe." Okay, so you can see there's some juicy, yummy sauciness in here. I did go ahead and drain my pasta. It needs a couple more minutes of cooking time. So this is the time you add a little bit of your salty, yummy, starchy cooking water. It pulls everything together, right? Like, I mean, look at this. You know it's going to be phenomenal. You can just tell by the way it looks. I want to add a bit more black pepper because I personally think black pepper, escarole, pine nuts go great together. You could also, if you are from, if you're from Napoli, you're very familiar with adding salted anchovies anytime you cook escarole. I love a good marinated anchovy. I love a good plump, oily anchovy. I cannot get on board with salted, preserved anchovies. My nonno used to make them himself, and they used to sell them in markets. Great, but I have nightmares from helping them do it, and it was not my favorite thing in the world, so I do not add salted anchovies. My mother, however, 100% would. So if you like them, this is your chance to go ahead and add some in, and that would be fantastic. So up to you. I'm just going to add a little touch more of cooking water along with a good handful of Parmigiano. And you're just going to have to wait and see what happens when you let this all cook together for like a minute. I'm going to go ahead and let that happen with the lid on. I'm going to let it cook together on like medium-high heat for like a minute, and then I'm going to just leave this off the heat covered for about 5 minutes, and everything kind of like gets absorbed by the pasta, and it is so good. Trust me. I know I think or two about carbs. Take pride in that. Look at that. I mean, that looks pretty phenomenal if I do say so myself. I kicked the heat back on just for literally 1 minute, just to get it super bubbly and delicious. And I mean, it's absorbed that standing time and sitting time, absorbed all of that luscious, beautiful broth. And now it's just this velvety, thick, just gorgeous. And it smells incredible in here. It smells like escarole soup meets meatballs. My mouth is watering. It smells so good. You know it's going to be. You know I need a cook's treat. You know I do. If I can get this meatball on my fork. There we go. A little piece of both. That meatball is so good. The hint of sweetness, the texture from the pine nuts, the sausage. Hot though. What else could you possibly ask for in the middle of a busy week? But this, maybe some fresh, delicious, crusty bread, glass of wine if you're up to that kind of thing. Job done. A beautiful reward in the middle of a busy week, or a perfect treat for a small weekend gathering that really makes people feel at home when they walk in and they smell something like that. Come on. Like literally amazing. So good. Go to laurainthekitchen.com for the written recipe. That is so spicy yet sweet. It's lovely. Just go to laurainthekitchen.com for the written recipe. I hope you enjoy spending time with me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.